Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everybody. We are a little late, like going into like 25 minutes late. However, we are here. And this evening, this is your sister, your friend, Mama Coco. Mama Coco is here this evening and I'm excited. I'm excited to present to you this young man hailing from the village of Speyside, Tobago. His name is Farley Augustine. Today we will know who Farley is and what Farley stands for and what Farley can do for the people of Tobago and maybe subsequently Trinidad and Tobago. Brother Farley is a teacher and academic. So he's on the job, he's working right now. He's a sportsman. He's a community leader, member of the opposition and assemblyman in the Tobago House of Assembly. Yeah, Brother Farley. Serving as area representative for Parlatuvier, Fourmi, and Speyside. Let's welcome Brother Farley.
Hi, good night, Mama Coco.
Brother Farley. A round of applause, my people. Youth in action.
Yes, good night, good night.
Youth in action. So, Brother Farley, good evening.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I am here excited, waiting for you to ease me up from explaining politics. And I have you here this evening as a civic teacher. And you're going to help me to teach the young people that you can thrive for success, no matter where you come from in the world. And I'm excited to get to know you more. And for the people to get to know you, those who are going to get to know you for the first time, and those that I'm going to reintroduce this man to. Brother Farley,
Yes, good night.
Who is Farley Augustine? No, Farley Augustine or Farley Chavez Augustine.
Right, so my name is Farley Chavez Augustine. I am 34 years old. I am from Speyside. I have been living in Speyside all my life. I was actually born in Roxborough, at the clinic in Roxborough, and I tell people that in those days, in the 80s, in 85 to be exact, when your mother was having her second child, she had the option of doing her delivery in Roxborough. So I was actually one of those who were delivered in Roxborough, and I think that makes me country to the bone. I'm a Tobago country boy, countryman to the bone, because my navel string tie right in country. Outside of that though, I know many people are intrigued by the fact that I also carry the name Chavez, and I tell people that my mother.
Why you get the name Chavez?
Sure, my mother was infatuated with a boxer that carried the name Chavez. I think he was a Mexican boxer, Latin American boxer, and she felt it was a cute name. Many years later, there became Hugo Chavez, and then I'm not so sure if she had known of Hugo Chavez at the time, if she would give me the name Chavez still. But Chavez is on my birth certificate. I carry the surname.
I think I get knocked off.
No, you're still online.
Something better.
Yes,
Engineer? Are you hearing me, Brother Farley?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Go right ahead. I want to know about this Chavez story, which is so intriguing.
Right.
And then I want to know, because your surname is not really a popular Tobago name. So tell us where the Augustine comes from.
Right. So I indicated that, the Chavez came from a boxer. Not Hugo Chavez, but a Latin American boxer that was popular in the 80s. And the Augustine actually came from Grenada. my great-grandfather is actually Grenadian. And so
Ah.
that makes me only the third generation of Augustines from the family that was actually born in Tobago. So my great-grandfather, Norbert Augustine, came to Tobago and hooked up with Alice McPherson from Delaford.
Delaford.
So the McPhersons in Delaford are my very close relatives.
So Farley, we are cousins too?
Sure, right, we are cousins. and so that's why the Augustine surname isn't as popular in Tobago, and that's because it's the surname of migrants, so to speak.
Yes.
But I must also indicate that on my mother's side of the family, my mother's maiden name was Pilgrim. And the older Tobagonians will perhaps know my grandfather, Orson Pilgrim, that drove the bus.
The guy with the
driver.
mustache. I know Pilgrim.
And the long fingernails. Yes, that's my grandfather.
His daughter went to Roxborough Secondary School also.
Well, that was my mother that went to secondary school actually. So his daughter, my mother, went to secondary school. Well, among his other daughters, because my grandfather had 27 children in total, quite a lot. Yes, you know how Tobago men were in those days, spreading the seed far and wide. So I have quite a huge Pilgrim clan. In addition to that, through my mother, I am also related to the MacLeods and Andrews from Belgarden. So my mother and her mother came to Speyside from Belgarden. And so it's a huge family connection all across Tobago East. So when you hear Farley Chavez Augustine, you're hearing somebody who has roots in Grenada. You're hearing someone with roots from Delaford, from Belgarden, from across the countryside. You're hearing somebody who has a very huge family connection, because family centers you.
That's right.
It's part of that Tobago tradition where family is sacrosanct, is important. In fact, whenever you meet a Tobagonian anywhere, the first question you ask, so whenever a Tobagonian meets you anywhere, the first question he will ask you is, what's your surname? Because he's trying to figure out who you're related to, who is your family. Because that's how we are in Tobago. It's about being connected to each other, and we value pumpkin vine. You can't sit and listen to any of my aunts or uncles and they are not talking about cousin this and cousin that, people that you don't know, because every pumpkin vine is important. Because I guess the pumpkin vine is connected to the root.
To the roots, genetics, DNA.
That's right. And once it's connected to the roots, your whole family has been sacrosanct, has been most important. And so now you hear Farley Chavez Augustine. It's not just Speyside involved in the mix. Speyside is huge in the mix, of course, because here's where I was raised, here's where the family lives. But it's a family that extends beyond just Speyside.
Yes. Well, we get such a touch there because we have a whole lot of Tobagonians from the diaspora all around, even Grenadians right there on the live today. And I know they are going to make a connection with this pumpkin vine.
That's right.
So you told us who is Farley. Let us know more about Farley's youth growing up and what excited him and where he went to school. And welcome, Brother Farley. Tell us who you are.
Right. So I was raised in Speyside, as I said. I attended both preschool and the primary school in Speyside. So the Speyside Early Childhood Center, in fact, my preschool teacher is still there teaching at the preschool. That is Janine Smart. I also had Miss Fifi as a teacher as well. She's no longer teaching there. She moved on to another career. From there, I went to the Speyside Anglican Primary School, and I entered the primary school in 1990. What a year! The year of the coup. So I started primary school in 1990,
Yes.
I only did 6 years at primary school because I was skipped one level. I never attended standard 3. So I went from standard 2 to standard 4.
And
so I did 6 years.
And that didn't spoil you. You know, some people say
no,
when you
it
skip
didn't.
children, no, you were skipped because of what?
I was skipped because the teachers felt that I had the ability to do the work at the higher level. So what they did is that they took me to the standard 4 class on a probationary period, and after a month they recognized that I was fitting in. I was getting accustomed to the work. I was doing well, and I never looked back. And from Speyside Anglican Primary, I went on to Bishop's High School in Scarborough. So I went into Bishop's in 1996. I'm sure at that stage your daughter Cindy would have already graduated, but I entered Bishop's in 1996 as the only student from my primary school to pass common entrance for Bishop's in that year. In that year, 9 of us passed. The remaining 8 went on to Roxborough Composite School, as it was called at the time.
Yes.
But I enjoyed living in Speyside, and I still do enjoy living in Speyside.
So did you come home? Did you travel back and forth every day?
Oh yes, I traveled to and from school every day. In my first 2 years of high school, first 2 to 3 years,
How many miles from Speyside to Scarborough?
That's approximately 24 miles from Speyside to Scarborough. But with all the corners and the uphills and winding roads, it will take at least an hour drive to and from Scarborough. Right, an hour to go, an hour to come every day. Wow. And the first 3 years or so of high school, I went with a maxi driver called Shuggy. He was the school bus driver. That's right, Shuggy from Shallaville. And then after traveling with Shuggy for a while, I then ended up traveling with Gary, that's Seeley, one of Gemma Seeley's sons. So he transported me for the upper school. And then by the time I got to 6th form, there was another maxi driver called Zico. So there was a constant supply of transportation, more or less, that was provided by the state, that, we traveled to and from school every day. In those days,
tell the people how exhausted that was, and if you had to do like carrying water or tote water or clean a yard, or what you had to do when you get home or before you go to school.
Well, that was exhausting. That was exhausting because you're driving longer than most of your colleagues to school, and then in those days Bishops ended at 3 p.m. and you will rush out of class, literally darting across the road and then across the walkover to catch your maxi on time, because if you missed the maxi, you had to then go down by where the bus terminus was, down in Scarborough, and then you have to fight up with people like Margaret Jack down there for the bus, and nobody wanted to fight up with Margaret Jack for the bus because Margaret Jack was pretty cantankerous, right? So you ensure you catch your maxi. When I was in primary school, I had a lot of chores in primary school. So the usual, I had to sweep the yard, you get flex broom, you sweep the yard, and so on.
We have to change the name from flex to coquille.
To coquille broom, right? Coquille broom, right? To sweep the yard and so on. Where I live now, in primary school, I spent most of my primary school time with my grandparents, who live within about 5 minutes walk from where my parents live.
That's so Luciville?
In Luciville, correct. In Luciville, by the old playing field, the first playing field. Yeah. My grandparents lived there, so I spent most of my primary school years growing up there.
So you use the playing field?
We use the old playing field, correct. You use the old playing field. Right around the playing field, you had cashew trees, baldo cashew trees there. You had mango trees up and down there. So growing up in plum trees, you had everything, and those were real fun times. When I got to secondary school, I lived mostly with my parents, because by then I had to be awake very early in the morning to take baths and to go to school. Sugar used to leave Speyside by 6:30. That was very early. So I used to be the first person to arrive in school practically. Sometimes when I get to school, it will be Mrs. Chong, the principal, and myself alone. But by the time I got to about third form, the government brought on several other maxis in the system. And that's when Seeley came on board. And then he was from Speyside, so he would leave Speyside closer to 7 o'clock. And so he had a bit of a wiggle room in terms of time to get to school. I also, just this week, I was telling somebody that after the first of the years with Shuggy, when I had to be up very early in the morning by 4:30 and taking the cold baths and so on, when the system got a bit lax and we had more transport in the system and the maxis were leaving a little later, I used to get up and go to the sea and bathe and then go to school because my parents' home is that close to the beach. I literally just have to cross the road and I'm in the sea. It's literally right there. So I grew up in the sea more or less. By the time I was 4 years old, still in primary school, I was swimming. I could remember getting licks to coming home and walking on the beach, having sand in my shoes. I remember one time coming home and they were pulling seine, and I mean we don't pull seine again in Speyside for a long while, but they pulled in seine and I stopped and had the little jacks in my lunch kit and so on. So
get a little free jacks.
Free jacks, that's right. And you know, I used to get all the buffings and so on for climbing all the grape trees and almond trees because coming home from.
So you really grew up like a small boy man.
Yeah, that's how country children are raised even to this day. I mean, if you come to where I live, you will be amazed that children from preschool, primary school, they go to the beach by themselves. I had a friend here recently and she was saying, but so no adults going with them? Isn't it like a occasion where you plan to go to the beach? I said, no, that's the shower, that's the bath. Meaning that you wake up in the morning, you go to school and so on, but when you are having at least one of your baths during the day, you have it in the ocean, you go to sea. It's like just a normal part of growing up here. And of course, you know, growing up like that, you will have the stains on the school shirt. So my mother was always annoyed by it. But
what color was your school shirt? Blue?
Blue shirts and khaki short pants. And I wore short pants all the way to standard 5. You know, in those days, you had post-primary children who would wear the long khaki pants, and some of the standard 5 children. But I wore my khaki pants, those with the flaps that didn't require any belt because there was no loop, right? My grandfather sewed those pants to me and I had to wear them to school proudly. And coming home from school, I tell people, was an adventure. You know, now, even in the village of Speyside, parents will drive to the school, pick up their children, bring them home. In my days, it wasn't like that. Every child walked home and we all walked home together. So it was a big adventure. It was like this huge event to walk home, and you're passing in every single shortcut. Even if the shortcut ends so short, even if the shortcut takes you to somebody else's home and then to your home, you know, it was an adventure that you had.
You get to learn the landscape, the terrain.
Correct. It was an adventure.
Yes.
And then I also always pay homage to the fishermen in my community. See the fishermen?
Yeah.
Because they are a large part of my upbringing. And
I was going to ask you, the jacks that you got, that jacks played a very great part with preparing meals for everybody in the home. You're not carrying home the jacks for you to cook. Your mom will clean that jacks, right?
That's right. And the fishermen have always been there. In fact, they were the ones who taught me to swim, and I always share this as a life lesson for people. That these fishermen will take you, they will say, come, let me go for a boat ride. You will go in the pirogue and you go out to Little Tobago and so on. But when they come back ashore, these fishermen will anchor the boat and jump out in the sea.
And you have to swim.
You have to swim. So by your doggy paddle until you learn to do your breaststrokes, but you had to learn to swim. And
so
I always tell people,
you should be the one that's swimming from Scarborough to Coco.
well, I was there with Mr. Duke in the water without any life jacket. But I was there in the water. I certainly don't think I could swim all the way from Tobago.
No, nobody
Coco.
can. No one can.
But you know, the idea behind that was to show how ridiculous it is to not have an efficient inter-island ferry service.
Yes.
And it was why I was so comfortable just jumping out in the water too. Because the life lesson that you learn from fishermen in Speyside, and I'm sure the people in Charlottesville and Castara and Argyle and Belgarden have similar stories, is that if you want to achieve anything in life, you better jump in the water. You can't learn to swim by staying in the boat. You will never learn to swim if you just stay in the shore. You have to jump in the water. You have to dare to go where your feet can't reach. You have to dare to go where it's deep. And that leap of faith that everybody must take, regardless of what career choice, regardless of what path you want to go down. You want to make it in this life, you better take the risk and take that jump, take that leap of faith. And you will swim. You will be amazed how quickly you will get it. You will not get it correctly the first time.
Yes.
The first time you will struggle to breathe. You will doggy paddle. You will be fatigued. By the time you get to shore. You will panic. But you know, once you get over that first jump, every other jump is inconsequential. Every other jump comes like a piece of cake. And that's why you have to just make the first jump. Make the first jump. If I didn't make this first jump, then I wouldn't be in politics today. I'll still be home as a keyboard tiger, cussing and quarreling and complaining and writing long posts on Facebook about the politics. But I wouldn't be in a position to directly have some influence on the politics. And
for a change.
For a change, yeah. Correct.
Because we can't keep the politics the way it is.
Correct.
Because the politics the way it is, we're not dealing with policies, neither people. So this is a good legway here now, Brother Farley.
Yes.
For the leap of faith. Tell us now about your educational journey.
Right. So when I went to Bishop's High School, I was actually the only student in Bishop's High School from Speyside when I entered in 1996.
Ooh.
Speyside did not have another student in Bishop's High for perhaps the next 2 years or so, 2 or 3 years. So I knew absolutely no one in the entire school.
Wow.
There wasn't a single student, there wasn't a single teacher that I knew. My parents knew Mrs. Marcelin Melville Jack because she had lived in Speyside for a while and taught in Charlottesville and so on. But I knew absolutely no one at the school. So it was a difficult first couple years, you know, getting oriented and you know, learning a new culture, learning new friends. I remember in those early days when I stood up in a classroom to speak, the class would be silent only to laugh at the end because I was a student with the most basilectal Tobago Creole. In other words, I could have talk a Creole raw as it comes, you know, and for them that was amusing because I was in class with several large cliques from
colloquial language or just
colloquial language. Colloquial language, because remember I went to a country preschool, a country primary school. I lived all my life in Speyside. Everybody around me is speaking the vernacular, including students at my primary school. There was no real major emphasis on you have to talk proper. So the Creole was welcome. Although I was always an excellent student of English, speaking English was never something there in my wheelhouse.
That's right.
But I overcame that. By the time I got to fourth form, I recognized that my strengths were in the history and English literature and geography and Spanish, and those were the areas that I concentrated on. When I finished high school, 2001, I graduated. I then did sixth form, and those days, of course, it was the Cambridge A-levels.
Yes.
Not the CXC Cape, but the Cambridge A-levels. I did those, so I did the general paper, I did the history, I did the lit, I did Spanish. After I graduated, I worked with TSTT for 2 years. TSTT had an outpost in Speyside, and I was the assistant there for 2 years. And then I decided
I didn't
one
know
day
that.
I decided one day while I was there at work, I said, you know what? Time to go to university. And I sat down there, and along with a cousin of mine, and we both signed up for university in Jamaica. Now I can tell you, I always had this idea of studying abroad. So because I didn't have the money for the Oxford, which was the initial dream, you know, I always have this dream to go to Oxford, and I think it's part of the retirement plan. But I said, you know what, I'll go to Jamaica. I'll go to Jamaica because I just could not see myself going right there to Trinidad. I wanted to go someplace far and experience some a bigger world than Tobago. So I signed up for Jamaica.
Round of applause. Now let me give you an applause because we're getting into the area where we will get to see and understand your educational journey. Yes.
Right. So I signed up for Jamaica. I got through. That was in 2005. Mona campus in Jamaica. I arrived in Mona at the end of September, almost.
How did you get there? How you get there? Did you get finance? Your uncle, your aunts?
Well, I started in 2005, and the government gate program only kicked in 2006. So what happened before getting there? I came home from work a day, and I said to my parents, I said, I need to talk to both of you. I said, I want to go to university and I have no money. So my father said, but how are we going to afford this? I told my father, I said, look, we need to go to the bank and look for a loan, but I think it's doable. I did the calculations, but I thought it was correct calculations. My father took me down to Scotiabank, and my father has the same name as me. So my father is also Farley Augustine, so I'm a junior. But everybody around here calls me junior. So we went to the bank, in Scotiabank in Scarborough. And when we got into the loans officer, my father said to the loans officer, I've brought my son and he will tell you what he wants. So my father did not even explain to the loans officer what I needed. I had to explain everything to the loans officer. I had to get all the documentations and carry it to the loans officer. I had to follow up with phone calls to the loans officer. And that's how I got money to go to Mona. I got into Mona the last week in September, thereabouts. Almost a month late. Well, a month late because school started the last week in August. But I got there a month late because my grandfather died that same month in September 2005. So we had to bury him first, and then I went. I remember the night when I left home, my mother could barely hug me. She was in tears, bawling down the place because she one boy picnic going to Jamaica, and the only thing she knows about Jamaica is that Jamaica had crime, and so she afraid. She son never lived outside of Trinidad and Tobago before. She son never lived nowhere but in she house and by her mother house. So she was in panic mode, crying and so on. And my father was the one saying, girl, we're crying for, let the boy go. We're crying for. So I went, got into Jamaica. When I got to Jamaica, I took a taxi from the airport, got to the university, don't know where I'm going, drive up and down the university, got registered, paid some fees, got to the hall where I was staying, and ended up paying the taxi in Jamaica. I paid the taxi in Jamaica about $300 and something US, only to realize long afterwards that I grossly overpaid the driver. You know, I thought I was, you know, just doing the driver a nice deed because he was up and down with me for the entire day. But when I did the translation after when I did the configurations after the calculations afterwards, I realized I grew up because it's like at that time it was almost $100 or a little over $100 to one Jamaican dollar. Now it might be about 180 something to a Jamaican dollar. So I grossly overpaid. In any case, I got to my room. Eventually found a high-low on campus, got some things to eat, went back to my room, and I just slept. But that was the beginning of what I felt was the most beautiful life experience I have had to date. If I have to live my life over, I will go right back to Jamaica and study. And when I went there, I initially was signed up to do media and communication. But when I got there, instead of going across to what we call Karimak to finalize that, I just went and signed up for linguistics. So I did linguistics. And at that time, I was trying to
explain to us and explain to
what linguistics is.
Yes, what linguistics are.
Well, linguistics is really the science of language and how human beings use language, how you and I use language. So with linguistics, I can break down even Tobago Creole. I can understand its genesis. I can understand the science behind it. I understand the structure of it. Wow. So there's actually structure to how we speak in Tobago and what we call a dialect in Tobago. Linguists like myself will tell you that that is actually a language separate and apart from English language.
Wow.
Let me give you an example.
Give people a chance to take a breath here. This is a lot. This is a lot. I told you, brothers and sisters, that we are in for a civic life, a life where we can learn, a life to encourage, a life to make people who feel that they can't go further, to get strength to move on. So, Brother Farley, tell us this journey and explain this thing about you could unfold language and
right. So let me give an example that will be easy. So, and that's why when I hear people now saying, "Oh, you're talking bad," I will usually be very harsh on them because that's colonial thinking. When slaves got here, they did not come here speaking English. They came here speaking a variety of languages and dialects from West Africa.
Yes,
they were forced to speak English and other European languages. So what happened over time is that a hybrid was formed that we call a Creole, right? So a Creole language was developed. And when we look, for example, at English Creoles in the Caribbean, or just like Tobago Creole or Jamaican Creole or Jamaican Patois as they call it, what you will find happening is that you will have elements from both English language and from West African languages. So let me give an example. In Creole, we will say the picnic them are play. The picnic them are play, which means the children are playing.
Yes.
In English, notice the word picnic does not exist in English at all. So that's a vocabulary, that's a lexicon difference or a word selection difference or a vocabulary difference. And then in English,
with an African overtone.
Correct. In English, we pluralize a word by adding S to the end, or what we call a S morpheme to the end. So child becomes children, boy becomes boys, and then in some English words like sheep, the S morpheme is silent. So sheep remains sheep.
Sheep.
Right? But fish. In Creole,
fish.
Right, correct. In Creole, in Tobago Creole, as in Jamaican Creole, and most English Creoles, we pluralize just as they do in West Africa, where the morpheme is a separate word that comes afterwards, what we call an unbounded morpheme. So in Creole, to know pluralization, for example, we will use the word them, the picnic them, the boy them, the girl them. It will never be girls or boys. And that in itself tells you that our Creole has a separate structure, a completely different structure to English language.
So when we are laughed at by our Twin Island people, like the Trinidadians, they should be taught to understand why we have this
language and why we speak the way we speak. It has to do with our history. It has to do with our ancestry and our heritage. So our language is part of our heritage. And it's why Jamaica, or brand Jamaica, has never gotten rid of Jamaica Patois as a way of speaking and communicating with the world. And you have people in the movies in Hollywood all trying to imitate Jamaicans. Why? Because Jamaicans have understood for a longer period than we have that their language, their Jamaican Patois, their vernacular, is of value, and that it's a distinct language to English language, and it is something that should be held in high esteem. And I could tell you, while studying linguistics in Jamaica, I also did a project where I went to Islington in St. Mary, where we taught children English language.
St. Mary's is where? In Jamaica?
That's in Jamaica, yeah.
Yes.
A parish in Jamaica.
Yeah.
And while there, we taught students English language as a second language, meaning that we will go into the classroom speaking in Jamaica Patois as the official language, and then teach them the English language as if they are now learning it, just like they know.
How you will learn English? My goodness.
Right. That's how we teach Spanish or French or Dutch. And what we have found in that research, led by Professor Devonish, is that when we teach English language as a second language, as opposed to making the assumption that English language is the first language, to Creole speakers, they actually learn English better and faster that way. But as I was telling you, I ended up in linguistics, and I was trying to avoid anything to do with politics at university. Because, to be honest, my mother did not initially want me to get involved in politics. Because, you know, here, when you hear politics and politicians, you don't think the most favorable thing. And my mother is that quiet kind of reserved character, you know, and she never wanted people to bad talk her in public. She's always said, people go call up your mother's name, they go say bad things about your mother, don't go in politics. So I was trying to avoid the politics. And then again, being a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, I thought maybe politics not for Christians at all. But while signing up, because I was late, the academic advisor forced me to pick up a course in politics. And when I picked up that course in politics, I could never forget. It was taught by a lecturer called Dickie Crawford, Introduction to Political Philosophy. Listen, I sat down in that class and I heard that man start talking about Plato and Aristotle and Ebenstein and Hock and Locke and so on. And my mind was blown. And so I decided, you know what, Farley, you can't run from the politics. This is where you love. So I decided to pick up a second major, but I decided to pick up the major in international relations as opposed to direct politics. So I ended up studying linguistics and international relations as my field. So those are my two strong suites, IR and linguistics. And on the IR side, it's why I eventually taught English language. On the linguistics side, that's why I eventually taught English language and English literature. And on the IR side, I ended up teaching Caribbean studies and doing a bit of sociology and so on.
Yes.
But those are my academic pursuits: IR, international relations, and linguistics.
Well done, Mr. Farley. Well done, well done, well done. And look at your age. Look at your age. I love your enthusiasm. Well, what I'm trying to say here now, Brother Farley, you are now a teacher, right? Still. And tell us why you returned to Trinidad and Tobago. Did you ever get a loan or a grant from the government?
Right. Yes, I did. So somewhere by around 2007, thereabout, or maybe late 2006, I eventually got through for financial assistance for the THA. Because the truth is, my parents were struggling to still meet all the requirements, even with GATE coming on stream in early 2006. And I could tell you, to get that grant was a hassle. Initially, I was getting no response and so on. I remember one morning, a Sunday morning, Hilton Sandy called my house because my father was then the village council president.
And Hilton Sandy is from Speyside.
Correct, he's from Speyside. He called my house to find out about a project in the village and to get my father's thoughts on the project. Now, those who know my father... So you got this
loan under the PNM government?
That's correct. But I tell you how I get the loan. But it's not even a loan, a grant. I tell you how I get it. So when my father was talking to Hilton Sandy, my father actually got upset with Sandy that morning, that Sunday morning, the good Sunday morning. And my father started to Lego some barrow on Hilton Sandy. Right? Over the
phone.
Some obscenities. And my father said to Hilton Sandy then, he said, look, my son up and down everywhere in all kind of youth function, in all kind of youth leadership, all using him here, there, everywhere. He applied or then even respond to him. If my wife was putting shit back on the ground for you, would I get a grant long time, right? My father is that raw and individual in terms of how he speaks, right?
Yeah.
And as luck will have it, by the middle of that week, I got a call that offered me the grant. And that grant, I think, was $30,000, I believe. And for that grant, I needed to work for Tobago for 1 year. Come and be employed by the THA for 1 year. So I returned to Tobago in 2009.
So you didn't have to pay back that money, no?
No, it wasn't a loan, it was a grant that I needed to pay back with service, with work for the island. So I returned to the island in 2009. Despite, colleagues in Jamaica saying, boy, stay on, you could eventually come and teach in UA. I kept saying, you know what? I promise Tobago that I will come back and work and give back that year. I am going to be honest and give back that year. So when I returned, initially, I did not find a job for a little while. As I was at home, just filling around. I would go by the high school in Speyside and, volunteer and do work with some of the boys at the school and so on. Because I just home. And then I got a call from then Secretary Groom Duke, who was then the Secretary of Education. And she told me, she said, but Farley, I'm in need of a communications officer. My communications officer is on holiday, and I heard you studied something related to that field. And I told her, yes. I said, one of my degrees is language, communication, and society, which is linguistics. So I could help you, even if it's temporarily. And I went and I worked for her temporarily, but I had applied for a teaching job. And while working there at the Division of Education, then Miss Brassy, I think her name was, who was in charge. I think Miss Brassy was in charge of doing that recruiting process. She called and said, but Farley, your name jump up for teaching. And several of the principals want you to come to their school to teach. You are one of those who applied, and several principals arguing and saying, no, come, send him here, send him there, and so on. She said, so what do you want to do? And without
you were in high demand. You were in high demand.
That's right. And without hesitation, I said I am going to teach. And that meant giving up a traveling allowance. That meant being paid less. But I felt at that time that teaching, I would be more useful. I would help a lot more.
That was your calling.
Correct. I would help a lot more students. And so I went into Speyside High School in September 2009. Nice. And I started teaching English and English literature first. I started teaching lower school those subjects, and soon I was in charge of the school's prefect system and then the student council and getting all of those things organized. And eventually I made my way into the middle management of the school. Oh. And then when we started the sixth form program, I then moved to teaching upper school only and started teaching what we call communication studies and Caribbean studies to sixth formers. Oh. Because communication studies require linguistics.
All of that Speyside school got?
Yes, that's correct. And communication studies require linguistics, and the Caribbean studies require a strong background in social sciences. And so I taught those, and I taught fourth form lit and fourth form English. And I thought
what was or is your success rate with students like?
Okay, well, I for both communication studies and Caribbean studies, I have never gotten a pass rate under 90% in both subjects.
Wow!
And in any given year, I have never gotten more than 2 or 3 failures in any given year.
Wow!
And I taught there for 7 years. I became a politician in 2017. So I ran for office in 2017.
So you started off, you started off politics with another party besides your PDP?
Oh, no. The only party I've ever run with is PDP. The only party I've ever become a member of is the PDP. Before running for politics, I never joined a political party. I was just a bystander, a usual commentator, And in those days, I used to also do hosting of television programs on Channel 5, Tobago Channel 5. And I also had a weekly op-ed column in the Tobago News. The Tobago News is now defunct, but I used to write for the Tobago News every week for at least 5 years, and I did Channel 5 for at least 5 years.
I never knew that.
Yes, so in 2016, before getting into politics in 2016, Mr. Duke used to call, and to be honest, I used to just ignore his phone calls. Because I did not see a career in politics at that time, and I just did not understand Mr. Duke's vision at that time.
Yes.
But something happened in 2016. In August of 2016, I took some students to London to visit the Westminster Palace, that's the Parliament in London, and also to Wales, the Parliament in Wales.
Oh.
And when I took the students there, I said, okay, this is a really good experience, and I got an even closer understanding of Westminster politics. I looked, and that was the second time I was going to the Westminster Parliament in London, to be honest. And I took that second trip very seriously. And I remember while on that trip, I went into Primark and I saw a suit for £30, full suit, pants and jacket for £30, a blue suit. And I purchased that blue suit and I said, Farley, when you are doing something extremely important, you will wear this suit. Now that blue suit was the second blue suit I ever purchased in my life. The first being the one I purchased for graduation. But by the time I got to 2016, that suit was old-fashioned and it was very big and ill-fitting and so on. You know how we used to wear clothes back in those days, big and ill and baggy. Yeah. So I bought this suit from London. I flew to Jamaica because I marked CXCs up until about 2017 or 2018.
You used to mark CXC?
Yes, I used to mark A-level CXCs, Cape CXCs. So I went directly from London. I flew into Jamaica to mark Cape that year. I marked, and then I came back to Tobago from Jamaica. When I landed in Tobago, and that same year I traveled again after I came back to Tobago. I think I went to Barbados or someplace that year. St. Lucia that year, I think. But when I came back to Tobago and I started listening on the ground, I realized more and more people were just saying, Watson Duke, Watson Duke, Watson Duke, Watson Duke. So I said, out of curiosity, let me listen to Mr. Duke to hear, what he was offering, what he was saying. And I listened to him, I listened to his vision, and his vision for Tobago was a radical one. Yes. Like radically different from what we have ever seen, at least my generation.
Yes.
Or heard. My generation has never experienced protest politics before Mr. Duke. Now, P.T. James was also a union leader. But for most of us on the island, we did not experience Fargo. Fargo died long before most of the people now were born. And so I listened to him. And then another party, the Tobago Forwards, came. I listened to them. That's with Christine Moore and that team. I listened to them. And then PNM came. And Nathaniel Moore, correct. And then PNM came. I listened to them. The Chief Secretary, Mr. London, spoke to me. The current leader of the PNM, who was then my area rep, Tracy Davison Celestine, she spoke to me as well. So literally, I spoke to every single side. And every single side was offering me a place to the politics. I was honestly confused at one point, and I know this may sound strange, but I'm a man of faith. And so I was home one Sunday and cooking a huge pot of pilau for a team of footballers in Speyside. So we had some visiting footballers, youth footballers from Trinidad, and I was cooking this big pot of pilau. I actually have a burn on my right hand from that pilau that day, because when I lift up the cover of the pot, I lifted up badly and the steam burnt my wrist, right? So that day I'm cooking the pilau and Watson is calling me, Orville is calling me, Tracy is calling me, Kristen is, everybody's calling me that day, and I am getting flustered, as in everybody want to answer and they want to answer now. So I called a sister from Shalville, a member of the faith, and I said to her, sister, I wanted to pray for me and pray because everybody calling me and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I said, please, just pray for me. She said, okay, well, I could pray now. No, I thought you would pray and then get back to me with an answer from the Lord. She said, nah, I pray now. So I am there cooking the pilau and she on the other end of the phone and she's praying down a storm. You know those prayer warriors are, right?
Yes, yes.
And she's praying down a storm. When she was finished, she said to me, she said, Farley, the Holy Spirit has never misled me. And the Holy Spirit does not give a bad word. And then she told me of some experiences. She said, I told members of the PNM that they would win 12-0 before because that's what the Holy Spirit said to me. And so I am giving you this word. All I am seeing, Watson Duke, big capital D-U-K-E. That's all I am seeing in your future. And when she told me that, in that moment, I said, okay, if the Holy Spirit and the Lord is saying, go down this road with Mr. Duke it is. And at that time, you know, Mr. Duke, and it's not that I didn't put any logic behind it, but at that time, Mr. Duke was assembling a team of political virgins, of newbies, people who never entered politics before, people who were never up and about and involved in the politics in any real and significant way. And I said, you know, Farley, the odds of winning with a team with Mr. Duke is slim to none. But if God said go with that team, go with that team.
That's right.
Because it's not about, for me, it has never been and it still isn't about the easiest ride to the top. That's not what it is about for me at all. My steps are ordered by the Lord. And whenever the Lord decides that I will get there, I will get there. Me and running ahead of him at all. He go lead, I go follow.
Amen.
So I said, you know what, Farley? The chances are slim to none, but you're going down that road. If that's where God say I have to go, that is where God say I have to go. And I got on board in November 2016. I was launched as a candidate in Speyside. I only told my parents and
that was a big launch. That launch had me like moving. I was listening and looking at it, and when you came on, like the village of Speyside went berserk.
Well, and that's why I'm forever grateful to the village, because when I decided to run, I only told my parents and family about 3 days before that I was going to run. I did not tell them before. Literally 3 days before I told them. And we assembled the family. We had family worship by an uncle. We prayed about it. And by the Saturday night, I was on the platform. And there has been no looking back since then.
Amen.
And I tell people, I don't know what God has for me in the future. I don't know what God's plans are for tomorrow, but me ain't worried about tomorrow. In fact, the way I live life, I take every day for what it brings. Every day God gives enough strength for that day. Tomorrow He will renew that. I don't worry, I don't panic, I don't lose sleep about tomorrow. I don't lose sleep about whether or not I will win and become the chief secretary. I don't lose sleep about that.
That would be nice.
Of course, that would be great. But what will be greater is God leading the way and God ordaining it. Because if God sets it up, no man could take it down. That's how I view life. And you know, for those viewing, I don't know what your faith system is. I believe in embracing people's faith and being tolerant and respectful of whatever people choose to believe. But if, like me, you believe in a power that is higher than yourself, then I believe that can help you become grounded. That will help you become the kind of person you need to be. And so I am in the politics now. I taught for 7 straight years until September of 2017. When I got back to school, the THA sent a replacement for me and asked the principal not to put me on the roll as an official teacher. But as I have said before, I know that has to do with the politics of it. Because I'm a minority assemblyman, and the law allows the minority assemblymen and opposition members to keep their professions because your salary is seen more as a stipend than a salary. But notwithstanding, I am at the school every single year. I teach the exam classes every year. I do exam preparations every year because as I say to the principal and the staff there, my role at Speyside High School was not based on a salary. It was based on a desire to help country children. Because I would tell you, Mama Coco, when I went off to university in 2005, there was literally only about 5 or so people in the entire village of Speyside with a degree. And I made it a lifelong mission to see how much more people from my village I could get into tertiary education. It cannot be just about me getting there and then the whole village proud that Farley have a degree and Farley study and Farley bright and I walk around with my head in the cloud. I am never comfortable being a shark in an aquarium. I prefer to be a shark in the big wide ocean where they will have other sharks and whales and bigger fish than me. Because